Hello everybody and welcome back to part 17 of what if Izuku Midoriya had the Omnitrix. This interesting series where he has the Omnitrix and goes on Ben 10-like adventures aside from doing the MHA canon. Right now we're in the middle of one of those, which is the Deku 10K arc, which this video kind of picks up on, so if you haven't seen the previous part, I suggest you check it out. It's pretty cool and it had me very overworked along with this one, because there's so many aliens I had to draw or get people to draw. I only got someone to draw like 2 or 3 I think in the end. I don't really know. I'm not really done yet. I still have stuff to do. That said, if you're enjoying this, please like, subscribe, and do all that. Comment below what's your favorite alien. Did you like this episode and the previous one? What's your favorite part of this new arc? And yeah, enjoy the video, guys. Malware? No. It can't be you. I cured you. I fixed everything with you. The future version of Izuku said, astounded and surprised.
You didn't cure me. You ruined my life. You made things so unbelievably worse.
Malware shouted back, anger overtaking him as he spoke. How? The future Izuku asked. The galvanic mechamorph's words were making no sense to him. I sacrificed the Ultimatrix to cure you.
No. It merely stabilized my condition for a time, but ultimately, it doomed me.
Malware shot back.
It destabilized my DNA further, limiting the time I have left to live.
But why not ask Azimuth to fix you, to cure you? The future Izuku questioned, viewing that as the obvious answer. He was the smartest mind around, so he'd be able to fix Malware like he originally intended before the Helix malfunctioned.
Father was useless!
Malware shouted in anger, slamming his fist against the ground, accidentally turning it to dust.
He said my DNA was too unstable, that there was no way of repairing it now. He refused to come to my aid, saying he had better things to attend to than a hopeless cause. I was in agony. So I went to the only person who'd offer aid, a cerebral crustacean by the name of Dr. Psychobos. He couldn't cure me, but he at least relieved my pain and lengthened the time I had left. But he asked for payment, so I gave the only thing I had.
The Omnitrix core blueprints, the future Izuku whispered, piecing it together. And ultimately, that led to the creation of quite the interesting device, the Mechamorph's partner stated. Let me guess. The one your little attack dog has been using to hunt me down over the last few months, future Izuku guessed. Yes, the Predatrix, an interesting device made with the blueprints of the Ultimatrix and filled with DNA of the universe's greatest predators, Kuiper explained.
Yes. Dr. Psychobos built it after I gave him the designs. He wanted to prove himself smarter than Azimuth, and I wanted revenge. So we hired Kuiper the Hunter to fill the device's DNA banks and hunt you down.
Malware explained.
So, after a long time of preparing ourselves, we finally went after you.
Oh, so you're just a hired gun, a mercenary, the future Izuku said, addressing Kuiper like he'd done countless mercenaries before him. How much did they offer you? My payment is the satisfaction of hunting down the greatest hero who has ever lived and mounting the Omnitrix onto my wall, Kuiper responded. We've been field testing the device for a while on you. We were only going to reveal ourselves after a few more tests, but since you found us, this seemed like a good time as any. After Kuiper said this, he brandished his blade and charged at Izuku. So I'm guessing there's some little kinks to work out with your knockoff, otherwise the dog wouldn't be the one using it, the future Izuku said, voicing a working hypothesis as he dodged 2 slashes, then turned into a polymorph, letting the attacks pass through him. Responding to the transformation, Malware turned his arm into a blaster, shooting it at the anti-gravity projector. Izuku tried evading it, but the attack was too quick for him to react to. The device was shot down, with the body being affected seconds after. May I say, I didn't fancy you for someone who trained the next generation. Is that human dealing with my attack dog your protege? Is he your offspring, perhaps? Kaiba asked, wanting to get a kick out of Izuku. In the end, I suppose it doesn't matter. He'll make a great trophy on my wall regardless of the case. Let me tell you something, Kaiba the Huntsman. You aren't going to lay a hand on him. The future Izuku exclaimed, turning into an apoplexian to attack. He swung at Kaiba with him evading most of the blows, but eventually, Izuku landed a few, throwing his opponent to the ground. Malware was about to retaliate, but Kaiba stopped him with a gesture. Oh, I don't have to, Kaiba said as he got back up, a smug look on his face. The attack dog is doing that for me. Hearing that, Wrath's eyes widened. He was concerned for the well-being of his younger self, so he gazed in his direction, seeing him running for his life from the Methanosian's predator. This wasn't how Midoriya thought his day would go. It was his first day back doing his work study after the whole overhaul incident. He was excited to get to do some hero work. Instead, he had gotten flung through space and time not once, but twice, meaning the same number of counterparts of himself. It had no doubt been a strange day. Now, the young Midoriya was on the run from a predator, doing the best he could to survive. Come on, recharge! Midoriya pleaded with the Omnitrix, trying to outrun the alien that followed him. It was a unique creature that possessed many legs and even more arms, a mouth at the end of each one of those. It kept on biting, trying to eat Midoriya, but he kept jumping out of the way, dodging and weaving, using the environment to his advantage so as to not be eaten. Every chance he'd get, he'd fiddle with the watch on his wrist, trying to get it to charge up again. There were many close calls. Luckily, he grabbed a couple metal and trash pieces that were around, blocking the mouths before continuing to run. After about 4 minutes of running, the Omnitrix finally lit up again. Yes! Midoriya exclaimed, activating the device. Who should I transform into? He wondered as he circled through the available listing. He knew he had little power left, so he'd only get one shot. Plus, any transformation he turned into could be countered by the predator. His future self had told him as much. Midoriya then started to overthink the situation, remembering the planning session with the future Izuku. Hold on a sec, the future version said right as they got the alarm, right before his younger self could transform. The predator could still be with them or turn up later. We need a plan. Any suggestions? The young Midoriya asked, looking at his future self with a demanding look. They were losing time. Someone might get hurt because of that. As a matter of fact, I do, the future Izuku answered. The predator is clearly not working alone. He only shows up after a villain attack, and the reactions to my transformations have a small delay. I've sometimes heard some ultrasonic frequencies when fighting them, which I think might be some sort of signal, the future Izuku said, descending into mumbling, but he snapped himself out of it midway through. You'll be the one to take on this trio. You should be able to take them on, but be careful. They're more dangerous than you might think. I know. I saw you fight them, the past self intervened. But what will you do? I'll be keeping an eye from a distance in my Volpimancer form. If the predator intervenes, I'll be able to follow his scent back to his co-conspirators, the future Izuku explained. Hold on. If the predator does show up, then how am I supposed to beat him? The young Midoriya voiced his concern, unsure if he would be able to fight off an enemy his future self, who had mastered the Omnitrix, couldn't defeat. You don't have to. You just have to keep him busy, the future Izuku answered, fully confident in his past self. You are going to have to be careful if he shows up, though. He has hundreds of transformations that I have seen, all of them being predators to species in the Omnitrix. It's not going to be an easy target to defeat, so, just to be safe... The future Izuku approached his younger self, grabbing onto his Omnitrix again, lifting the screen with the faceplate lighting up as a result. He maintained his hand on the screen for a second, and the screen flashed twice as a result. Knowing it was now ready for the codes to be put in, the future Izuku started touching the screen, inputting a couple codes, unlocking 10 new transformations. Having the new transformations available, the young Midoriya started looking through them, wanting to learn about them more. Okay, now we have to get going. Otherwise the villains are going to escape. The future Izuku added, transforming his past self into a Kinesellarian before transforming into one himself. Both heroes then set off to take on their respective tasks. While thinking back, Izuku was hit by one of the mouths which the creature had used as a tentacle, throwing Midoriya to the ground. I should go with one of the new ones, Midoriya thought, faced with the reality of the situation. He had to either act or suffer the consequences, so he hit the Omnitrix. When the flash of light subsided, Midoriya had turned into a Forginian, a creature that had a human-like body with 4 very hot appendages sprouting from its back. The creature shot out some of its mouth, snapping them at Midoriya, wanting to bite into him. The tentacles were met by Midoriya's own, which burned through the creature's plant-like skin. It reeled from the attack, its arms burning. Its arms took a bit longer to heal, but once they did, it attacked again, seeing as that was its objective. Midoriya used the time between attacks wisely, observing his environment and sending his arms at small metal debris that were around. The arms gobbled the metal up, absorbing them into the body. Once the predator attacked, Midoriya shot some of the molten metal out of the creature's arms, burning them further. All its limbs had basically been destroyed, blocked from healing by the rapidly cooling metal. A sound inaudible by the human ear filled the street. Reacting to it, the creature transformed, shifting from the plant-based being to a crab-like rhino made of rocks. Midoriya again threw more molten metal at the beast, but this time it did little to it. The predator ignored the hit and charged at the Midoriya, demolishing anything that stood in its path. Midoriya planted himself firmly and tried to stop the predator's movements, but he barely stopped it for a second. Seeing how incompetent he was against the beast, Midoriya shot a tentacle up, planting it on a nearby building and going up towards it. Midoriya planted his feet against the wall, sticking to it. He then used the extra appendages, spitting out some molten metal in the form of a rod. He then hit it a bit with his regular arms, absorbing the excess heat to cool the metal. He had made a sword which he then threw at the predator. He made a few more attempts, throwing the blades at the monster, which was failing to scale the building. The metal isn't strong enough, Midoriya concluded, looking around to spot any stronger metals to eat. As he searched, Midoriya spotted a bit of a glint in the distance. Moments later, a concussive blast came in his direction, but Midoriya blocked it with one of his tentacles. He then made his way to the huntsman, which had shot him from a distance, eating up some of the metals on his way. However, before he could reach Kyber, the huntsman sounded his whistle, telling his pet to transform. The predator quickly did so and rushed to its master's side as a root shark, jumping at Midoriya to stop his path. The root shark bit into Midoriya, sending him falling down with it. Midoriya did all he could to not get eaten by the beast. In the end, there's no way you'll beat my pet, Kyber smugly said, standing over Midoriya who laid at his feet. Thinking his opponent defeated, Kyber ordered his beast to return to its base form, and so it did. I wouldn't be so sure, Midoriya countered, extending one of his tentacles at Kyber while getting up. Kyber blocked with his blade, only to have it eaten by Midoriya. Izuku then sent another one after Kyber, but it was blocked by the huntsman's pet, who once again transformed into Crab Dozer. After him, Kyber commanded, the beast charging at Midoriya as a result. Midoriya was forced to run, swinging from one building to another with his arms, evading Kyber's bullets and staying in the air so the beast wouldn't be able to attack. Luckily, he managed to maneuver into a blind spot of the hunter. There, he combined the metals in his insides, creating an alloy out of all the metals he had absorbed and forging 2 blades with it. Right as he finished, the watch started beeping, the noise being succeeded by a red flash of light. Out of power already? Midoriya wondered as gravity took hold since he was no longer tethered. With the time it took the Omnitrix to recharge, it was obvious it had time out sooner rather than later. Izuku plummeted to the ground, the new weapons he had forged in hand, trying to figure out a way to escape his fate. He planted one of the 2 swords into the wall, slowing his fall slightly, but he ended up losing his grip as he fell, letting the blade go with still quite the fall ahead of him. Unfortunately, letting go of the blade made his fall less stable, so he had accidentally created distance from the wall. Izuku started thinking, trying to figure out another way to stop himself from falling. While the young Midoriya was taking care of the predator and its master, keeping them busy, the future Izuku stared Malware down. "You'll be able to get through this. Relax. If you wasn't, then I wouldn't be here," the future Izuku thought, shifting his attention back to the villain. Unfortunately for him, his distraction was taken advantage of. Kyber came charging at the man, blade first. The future Izuku blocked the punch, switching into his Talpedian form, letting the species' natural armor block the blow. He then punched back, the jackhammer in his arm strengthening its blow significantly. Reacting to the new transformation, Malware shot a small disc at Deku's feet, a stream of electricity surging out of it and enveloping him. The electricity hurt him, keeping the hero at bay for a bit.
"I'll make sure to take care of this insufferable hero,"
Malware said.
"You'll get your prize once we're done, but I assume your talents will be more useful elsewhere."
"Fine. I'll go after the boar then," Kyber said, pulling out a rifle blaster and jumping away.
"Now, it's time to make you suffer like you caused me to,"
Malware said, approaching the future Izuku, who was struggling to stay on his feet.
"Don't worry. I'll be sure to keep you alive, but just long enough to watch your new successor die by our hands."
Once Malware got close enough, the future Izuku transformed into his conductoid form, absorbing the energy from the disc and shooting it at Malware. Once the disc was depleted of power, he quickly turned into a Transillion, adding a magnetic element to his attack in order to keep the galvanic mechamorph at bay, since that was its weakness. The technological being was basically paralyzed once the attack hit him, with most of his efforts going to maintaining his physical being in the same form. The further the attack affected him, the more unstable his cells and DNA became. "Not smart getting rid of your only ally, especially when I know how to deal with a galvanic mechamorph," future Izuku argued, keeping the attack on him.
"You really think such a simple attack can stop me for long?"
Malware countered. He focused his attention on his hand, with it turning into a special type of blaster. He shot at the future Izuku, a weird foam coming out. As it traveled through the air, it seemed to absorb all the electricity that came its way. The future Izuku tried increasing output to shoot the attack away, but that didn't work. In order to protect himself, he lifted up the metal around him, blocking the attack. But Malware didn't relent, shooting the strange foam at Midoriya until he was covered in it. The foam quickly solidified, rendering the hero immobile. Izuku switched into an ectonorite, phasing out of the solid foam. The moment he escaped, he was met with a blast that affected the intangible being, which sent him flying back. Before he hit the ground, Izuku switched into a Galilean, negating his fall. He quickly used his abilities to lift Malware up into the air, but Malware readjusted his body, shooting out his arm like a spear to tether himself to the ground. "You really think that's gonna get me to let you escape?" Izuku asked, increasing the lift on Malware, snapping his arm off and throwing him into the air to keep Malware at bay. In response, the enemy shot out a barrage of blaster fire, which Izuku blocked by moving the metal in front of himself. Without Izuku noticing it, the pieces of the galvanic mechamorph's arm made their way to the alien. They implanted themselves on the Galilean's body and started drilling into him. Izuku tried to adjust the gravity to repel them in any way he could, but he failed to do so. In order to avoid a meltdown of his core, which would put everyone around him in danger, Izuku switched into his Tetraman form, the smaller drills falling off and returning to the main body. Izuku then charged at Malware, throwing some debris from around the environment as he went in order to throw his opponent off. The fight raged on for a few minutes, with the future Izuku switching from alien to alien, trying to beat Malware. But Malware seemed to have him countered every time he did. In the end, Izuku turned into his Alborian Pellerota form and tried smashing into Malware, but as he charged at the Mechamorph, he was met by a massive concussive blast that sent him flying into the air. As the young Midoriya fell, he kept trying to come up with a way out of the situation he was in, but to no avail. Lucky for him, his future self crashed right next to him, switching into his Turbosaurian form. He then leapt into the air, flying back to where he came from to continue his battle. "I could use a little help!" the young Midoriya screamed from the top of his lungs, catching the attention of his future self. The pterodactyl-like alien turned around, grabbing the young Midoriya inches before he hit the ground. "You okay?" the future Izuku asked, setting his younger self down and taking a couple steps back. "I'm fine, but..." the younger Midoriya started, but he was interrupted as a gigantic energy blast hit his future self. "Don't you know it's rude to interrupt?" the huntsman asked as his pet wrecked the city by just moving around. To resist the blast, the future Izuku had quickly switched into his Archelian form, an alien that can retract itself into its nearly indestructible exoskeleton. "Not as rude as wrecking everything in the city," the future Izuku countered. "You're lucky that I had the area evacuated as we were on our way." "I don't think we're going to be able to beat them here," the young Midoriya opined, looking at his Omnitrix that had still not timed in. "Planning on running away?" Kyber asked sarcastically, unleashing his whistle. Reacting to it, his pet transformed into a Kinoseleran's predator and started shooting his sticky goop at the two Midoriyas, trying to get them stuck. Before a single one of the goop projectiles hits, the future Izuku turned to Chitra Preya and ran out of the way, grabbing his younger self as he kept running. "You're probably right. We're gonna regroup, so hold on," the future Izuku said, cautioning his younger self with the increase in speed. Seeing them retreat, Kyber let out another whistle, his pet turning back to its base form and returning to his side. The huntsman then called his ship, following behind the hero's tail. After running a couple hundred miles, the future Izuku stopped amidst the forest, dropping his younger self off and turning back to his human form so he could catch his breath. "What's the plan now?" the past counterpart asked, not sure how to proceed. The villains had him outmaneuvered with everything he tried, but his future self had to know how to proceed. He just had to. "I don't have one, so resting a bit, I guess," the future Izuku said, letting his body fall into a rock, his eyes closing. "So you're just going to give up?" his past self asked him. "There's nothing shameful in waiting for reinforcements or to take some time to figure out a new plan," the future Izuku argued. "You're right, there isn't. But that's if you're actually trying," the young Midoriya countered. "People can get hurt if we wait too long. The fight already ravaged through a big part of the city." "We'll rebuild. It'll take less than 4 hours to fix that amount of damage," his future version responded. "Why does it look like you've already given up though?" the young Midoriya asked, looking at his future self just lying there. The future self sat up, staring at his younger self with a serious look. "You have no right to ask me that," he argued. "You haven't been through what I have, haven't lost what I have. I've seen many heroes meet their match, and I've clearly met mine. In between Marvel and the Predator, they have countered any of the 1,909 different aliens I can turn into." "Really? With that many, there has to be at least one exception," the past Midoriya argued. "There are some they won't be able to counter, but the relationship with those is complicated, to say the least," the future Izuku said, looking at his watch with a sad look in his eye. "But that's not the issue. We can't beat them. The best course of action is to send you back. Maybe you can fix things before they happen." "You can't give up," Midoriya said to his future self. "It's a bit too late for that," the future Izuku said, lying back down. He still hadn't come to grips with it. That it was all his fault things ended up this way. He thought he had cured Malware, but he just came back with a vengeance. What if he had doomed all the people on Earth to the same fate? He had been curing their genetic defects, what many called quirks, to fix the quirk doomsday that seemed to approach, but what if it all came back worse now? Why did you want to become a hero in the first place? The young Midoriya asked. What? Why did you want to become a hero? The young Midoriya reiterated his question. I wanted to be like All Might. I became a hero because I wanted to save people with a smile. I didn't know the burden that would come with, though. You became a hero to save people, but instead you're just here sulking. You're worse than All Might after he retired. I haven't even seen you smile once. You're right. I may not have lost people. Might is still alive and all the bad stuff hasn't happened to me yet. But I know that as long as I'm alive, hope exists. We can still fight on, and we can still save people. Make sure no one dies or suffers more from this, the past version of Midoriya argued. Why are you mentioning Ida? He's still alive, the future Izuku asked. The point is, we can still fight on and fix our mistakes. We can't go back, but we can work hard to not repeat them. You're right. I have to keep trying. I have to keep going, the future Izuku said, hitting himself on the cheeks and getting up. So, what's the plan? The young Midoriya asked. Right after the last word came out of his mouth, Malware, Kyber, and his pets caught up to the two heroes in their ship. I guess we're winging this, his future self said, turning into his Tetraman form. I'm still out of power, the young Midoriya said, showing his future self his Omnitrix, the faceplate still red. That might be a problem. Here, the Tetraman said, pulling up the faceplate and inputting a sequence. Once the sequence was put in, the younger Midoriya was turning to a Tetraman too. Like this, you won't time out until you want to, while still being able to switch if you need to. Sorry for interrupting the moment, but we have unfinished business, Kyber said, sticking his pet onto the two heroes. The animal turned into a trinopede, crashing into the environment with enough force to utterly crush the two heroes. The two Midoriyas evaded the blow, one by turning into Ice Wing, while the other used his ectoneuroid form to evade it.
That won't stop us from defeating you,
Malware said, using a phase shifter to block the two heroes in place before shooting at them with his blaster. The future Izuku turned into a Petro Sapien, creating a barrier to block the attack, while his younger self turned into Reverb, multiplying it to send a sonic attack. Deeming him the bigger threat, Kyber ordered his pet to transform. It turned into a Penuncian, splitting apart to eat every copy of Midoriya. The sonic attack hurt the pet, but it just kept multiplying to evade the blows while picking off Midoriya one by one. Once he had only a few forms left, he fused together and turned into Mr. Nature, throwing seeds into the environment to restrain the predator's different forms. A noble effort, but not enough, the huntsman said, observing the battle from a distance. He again let out his whistle and his pet transformed into Methanosian's predator as a result. The beast ate the restraints easily and made his way to Midoriya, so Midoriya shot out a couple fireballs, but they seemed to do little to the beast. Midoriya then switched into Brainy, shooting out an electric blast to take out his opponent. The predator turned into a Vicetopus, taking the energy blast and going to eat Midoriya. To try and avoid being devoured, Midoriya turned into Ice Wing again. Once the beast put him inside his mouth, Midoriya just phased out, freezing the beast over. That would not be enough to take the predator down, as it transformed into a Hypnotech. Midoriya was quickly enthralled by the swirling lights that the beast was creating, standing in place and looking at them. The Hypnotech used its prey's complacency to approach it. It was seconds away from eating Midoriya, but right before it could, the future Izuku in his Alburian Polaroda form crashed into his past self, snapping him out of it. Sorry about that, the future Izuku said, switching to an Oroid and approaching Malware while shifting his body to make a spear-like form. No problem. Thank you, Izuku said, turning into a Pyronite to try and attack again. As the Orioid came at him, Malware unleashed a flamethrower, burning some of Izuku before he retreated, turning into Pyranosian A. He rushed at the galvanic mechamorph, dealing blow after blow, but no matter what he did, the mechamorph seemed to have him countered, absorbing the nuclear energy from the alien and converting it into thermal energy, slowly overheating Izuku. After a minute of attacking, he had already depleted his energy reserves.
Haven't you been paying attention? None of your alien forms can even stop me,
Malware said, after a while of Izuku trying to defeat him. No matter what he tried, it didn't seem to be enough. Fine. If they won't do the trick, then maybe I can, Izuku concluded, turning into his human form. He grabbed 2 flashbang grenades, throwing them into the air to blind the villain. He then rushed at the villain, jumping behind him before pulling out an electromagnetic explosive and placing it inside the galvanic mechamorph's body. He closed his eyes and prepared for it to go off, expecting for the explosion to defeat the villain, but the blast never came, as the villain just absorbed the technology, decaying it.
That was the stupidest idea I've ever seen. Did you really think that would work?
Malware asked, towering over Izuku. It was worth a shot, the future Izuku opined. He turned into an Orthoterran and jumped away to avoid further attacks. He then switched into an Ormerovan, a zombie-like alien. He approached Malware, trying to absorb some of his life force, but Malware kept his distance, not letting his opponent close. Once Izuku managed to touch Malware, he found the life force he absorbed far more damaging to him than nourishing. He turned into an Amperi, trying to defeat the opponent with energy once more. While the future Izuku kept on trying different aliens against Malware, trying to see if any of them could work, his past self kept on fighting the Predator. He had already cycled through all his usual forms. "Need to try something new," the young Midoriya said, turning into Toku Star. He smashed his foot, slamming the creature into the ground. He then grabbed onto it, lifting it up to throw it away. But before he could do that, the huntsman ordered the beast to switch forms once again. Once the beast had switched, it seemed as though he had just disappeared entirely. Midoriya looked at his hand dumbfounded for a second, wondering what happened. Moments later, he started feeling an itch on his left arm, then on his right leg, then in the middle of his torso. The itchiness got worse and worse until it started hurting severely. Once it extended to his horn, Midoriya lost consciousness, falling over as millions of tiny organisms kept eating at him. "Ah, you gotta be kidding me." The future Izuku voiced his discontent after seeing his past self fall so easily. He then turned into an Orhisan and put his hands to the ground, unleashing a massive wall of steam.
"Hide from me all you want. I'll get you in the end."
Malware gloated, slowly absorbing the steam from the air. The future Izuku turned into Florpus Tesabo, portaling over to his past self. He appeared on top of his chest, swapping to his Galvan form to better be able to read the situation. "Okay, what is the matter with you?" he asked himself while he looked, spotting a pretty small creature. "Ah, I see. The Tokustar's natural predator, the Tre Scavagers. The only way to properly dispose of it would be a well-placed electric blast that covers the whole body," he concluded. The future Izuku then turned into a nose demon and multiplied himself, unleashing a gigantic energy blast that covered the whole Tokustar's body. The blast had the effect of both causing the predator to retreat and waking the young Midoriya up, but it did take a lot out of future Izuku. "Man, I'm tired," the future Izuku expressed as he got up from the crater back in human form. "I really need a nap." "You'll be able to sleep once we finish this," his past counterpart responded, stepping out of the crater as an arachnid chimp. "You'd be tired too if you've been up for 72 hours straight, taking care of incidents worldwide," the future Izuku shot back. "Wait, a nap? Isn't there an alien for that?" Midoriya wondered for a moment, remembering having seen something about that in his new alien listing when he was looking them over before. It was only brief, but it might work. Malware charged at the Midoriyas, trying to cut them with an energy blade from his hand. The future Izuku switched into his Patrosapien form, blocking the blow with a crystal blade. A root shark also came in their direction, so it was forced to block him too. Midoriya then transformed again, turning into a fairy-like alien. "No, not an Emuina!" Kyber shouted in fear, stumbling back. The past Midoriya then flew up into the air, unleashing the dust into the environment, sending everyone to sleep for the next few hours. The only one to avoid the dust was the future Izuku, who quickly erected a diamond tent to not breathe in the sleep-inducing dust. Once the dust flew away, the future Izuku left the dome. Once he did, he was met by a sonic blast from Malware, which shattered the Patrosapien's crystals. Why isn't he asleep? The young Midoriya wondered.
"The Emuina dust doesn't affect non-organic species, fool!"
The galvanic mechamorph expressed. "Don't worry, I'll take care of him. You make sure to disable the other two in case they wake up," the future Izuku ordered, switching into a Methanosian to attack again. The past Midoriya followed his future self's suggestions. He thought that if he left the two there, that Malware might be able to wake them up, so he turned to Speed Lizard, speeding him a couple hundred meters west. He then came back grabbing his dog, which had returned to his base form, and took her too. With the two opponents isolated, Midoriya switched to Metallurgy, eating the caller's metal, so the Predatrix fell off. Once that had been accomplished, he turned into a Patrosapien, trapping both the hunter and his pet in a crystal prison. While he disabled them, the future Izuku kept fighting, throwing fireball after fireball at the mechamorph, using the plants around him to restrain the villain so the fireballs would hit.
"These flimsy attacks are pointless. I have a counter for every one of your alien forms. You can't beat me. There's only one enemy that can beat me, and that is time,"
Malware boasted, extinguishing the flames and cutting through the trees with a makeshift saw. His companion may have been beaten, but he wasn't so weak that he'd fall so easily. "Not a bad idea, but I bet there's something I can do that's better," the future Izuku said, shifting forms once again, turning into a Toku star. "Let's just say the gloves are off," the Toku star shouted. He grabbed Malware, with him trying to overtake his body. The future Izuku shook his hand, throwing the mechamorph off. He grabbed onto him quickly before he could hit the ground, throwing him out of orbit. With his opponent off planet, Izuku jumped into the air, following behind it.
"You really thought you'd kill me by throwing me off planet? I'm not organic. I don't require oxygen or any other substance to sustain myself,"
Malware boasted. He rearranged his arm back into a concussive blaster, shooting it at the Tokustar's head, but the future Izuku blocked it easily with his hand. "I'm sorry that you're in pain, but that doesn't mean that you're allowed to inflict it onto others," the future Izuku said, unleashing a cosmic storm on Malware, powerful enough that it ended the being quite quickly. "I hope the afterlife treats you better than this plane did," Izuku said, turning into an aerophibian and returning to Earth. "Did you defeat him?" the young Midoriya asked as his future self landed in front of him. "Yeah, he won't be bothering us anymore. He's somewhere where he won't be able to hurt anyone ever again," the future Izuku said. "But I think it's time I take a look at your Omnitrix." Sure," the past Midoriya said, showing it to his future self, who just hit it, turning Midoriya back into a human. "I guess it's time to figure out how to send you back home then," the future Izuku commented. "I suppose that's my cue," Paradox said, appearing out of nowhere as usual. "You're unusually late, aren't you, Professor Paradox?" the future Izuku asked. "I apologize. I was dealing with an upcoming crisis. It's always one thing after another in the time stream. I'm bound to be late sometimes," Paradox retorted, turning to the young Midoriya. "Are you ready to go?" "I think so," he said, looking once more at his future self, then at his watch. "Are you sure it's okay to let me go with the new aliens? You didn't have them when you were me." "It's fine. They might do you some good in the past, his future self opined. Just make sure to use them wisely. Don't over-transform, it might lead to some issues, especially when I use the prototype. Not to mention, it gets you to time out quicker and gives the villains a chance to get the upper hand. Understood, the young Midoriya said, turning back to Paradox ready to leave, but his future self spoke up before they could. Oh, and one more thing. Things are going to get very bad in the coming months. Above all else, be sure to stay positive and smile. Don't let the darkness overwhelm you, his future self said. And keep your friends close. I think it'll do us some good if we rely on them more. Okay, Midoriya said, giving his future self an honest smile. Paradox then opened a portal with both him and the young Midoriya heading through it. They came out of the portal inside of a bank. When are we now? Midoriya asked, back in a time and place that seemed more like his home. Are you sure you have the right place? Midoriya turned to Paradox, expecting him to answer, positive. It all seemed to be right. This was the bank where he tackled Exoskull into the weird portal earlier in the day, but when he looked at where Paradox was supposed to be, he was gone again. Can he at least say goodbye before he leaves? Midoriya asked himself as he turned back around to exit the bank. When he reached the exit, he found a blaster pointed right at his face. Izuku Midoriya, you're coming with us, a plumber ordered with Izuku raising his hands. And you've reached the end of the video. That means you have two options, and you have to do both now. Like and subscribe, because it took me a lot of work to make this, and I really want it to be appreciated, okay? Just to say you appreciate me in the comments, because I put so much work into this, and I have so much other stuff to do. With all that said, I do hope you enjoyed this arc. Now we're going to go back into some MHA stuff, and I'm going to try to build off of what happened here to lead to a more interesting arc for Izuku, because he doesn't have all the one for all thing, but now he has future knowledge, which is a blessing and a curse. So yeah, I hope you guys are looking forward to the coming parts. I just want to say now, I'm going to follow the manga continuity because I didn't like that MHA skipped the My Villain arc, so that's how it's going to go. Next we're going to get the Culture Festival and stuff, then we're going to get the 1A versus 1B, and then we're finally going to go to the My Villain before ending this core, or however you want to call it. All that said, I hope you enjoyed. Comment what was your favorite part in the description below, or the favorite alien you saw, or predator, or whatnot. And until next time, everyone, have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye!